Buddies on this Monday, the 25th of September, 2023. Few things happening this week. Of course, Trading Buddies will be here on Monday and Thursday, but there's a whole lot of stuff happening in the Actions to Wealth YouTube channels and, of course, social media platforms, so keep your eye on those as the week progresses. First up, it is Ash and myself. Ash, of course, will be getting the late mail just prior to London Open, and I will be looking at the gold chart right now just to see if we can find a trade to start the week. That is not the gold chart. Actually, there's some interesting things on there. Ash will go through that a little bit later. That's the gold chart that we want to look at. It's the 1 hour chart that we attempt to find a trade on. Those of you joining for the first time, you will not know exactly how that works, so I will explain. We're attempting to get the breakout of Asia session range, and that range, of course, is dictated from the beginning of Asia session and concludes with the current candle. The current range is I'll just notate that via lines, if that's a thing. And there we go. That's the range that we're seeking to break. With the rules that apply currently, and these change when we review them, or when we review the results, which we're probably due to do, dictate that we take profit at a pivot. Currently, or today, that's going to be the weekly pivot, and probably DS2. You could say DS1. I'd be prepared to go to DS2 primarily because of that low there. Is that worth the risk, is the question. So we'd be risking $5 to gain $3. On the upside, on the downside, we would be risking $5 to gain about $6.20. So that sounds okay, but the 5 for 3 is not something that I'm that happy about. So I will probably not take this. Depends a lot on where the candle is at the time. You can see it's right on the daily pivot at the moment. And we've got less than 2 minutes to go. I'll keep my eye on it. If it pulls back off here, say to around about the open of the previous bar, then I'd be okay with it. But I'm not really okay with going long here at 5 to 3 on. So let's wait just a tick. In the meantime, let's see how last week would have performed. Friday doesn't look that good on the 4 hour chart now. Sorry about that. Although, actually, what I'll do is I'll come back and have a look at this and I'll put the pivots on. That is the DR1s and DR2s, just to see exactly how this would have worked last week. All right, nearly there. Nearly there. Okay, tick tock, tick tock. Looks to be a break and retest of the daily pivot, doesn't it? Which to me suggests potential downside. Righto, nearly there. And 10 seconds to go. Is pulling back a little bit. Weekly pivot coincides with the high. Okay, there's our candle close. And the new one is in motion. I'm going to stay out, guys. I'm going to stay out. Don't really like the scenario. It is Monday. Not a lot of stuff goes on a Monday, so I'd be considering this may well just hang around this range that we've got, maybe up to the high, but not that fussed. All right, let's have a look at last week. As I said, I'll put the what indicator? There we go. I'll put the pivots on. Day properties. We want to see all levels. Yes, we do. Okay. Might be a bit hard to see. Let me make them a bit clearer. Inputs. Why is that not showing that? That's interesting. Colors, that's what I want. So I want DR1 and DS1, which is 1 and 4. So let's go with green for DR1 and red for, actually, yeah, that'll do, DS1. We'll make them bigger so we can see them. There we go. Okay. Right, so this will show us what we should have as a result from last week. The week began, where are we? Monday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. So the week began here. Here's our range from here. Let me get rid of these. Our range is from here. The 9 o'clock bar is the one we want. And that's 8 o'clock, that's 9 o'clock. So the high is here, the low's here. Wouldn't have been taken into the low or into the long, into the short, would have been taken into the long, and that would have been a winner because you would get out at DR1. Would you have taken the trade is the question, trading straight into the daily pivot and DR1? Answer no, and I don't think I did take that trade. So it would have won had we taken it, but very small winner. Tuesday, here's your opening, here's your opening bar. So the 9 o'clock bar, which is the current one, is there. So the low is here and the high is here, same bar, or next bar actually. And you would have been taken in long, wouldn't have got your profits. You probably would have been taken out there, certainly taken out there. So Tuesday would have been a loser. Wednesday, here's your opening bar. The low, this doesn't look good either. Is that the 9 o'clock bar? It's the 10 o'clock bar. So that would have taken you in and smashed you out. Would you have traded that daily pivot here? DS1 here? No, you wouldn't have traded that, surely. That's not an option. That one wasn't great either, but that one's certainly not an option. So you shouldn't have traded that. Had you done so, you would have got hammered. And Thursday, here's your opening bar. So here's your high. And the 9 o'clock bar would be there. So your low is here. You would have been taken in short and got a nice result. And on Friday, you would have been taken in long because here's the low. And there's the high. In there, still in, hasn't hit it. It didn't hit it. You would still be in that trade. Wow. If you want to really carry that over the weekend, you'd still be in the trade and still looking for this level here. So there we go. Winner, shouldn't have been in. Loser, shouldn't have been in, but it was a winner. Bit of a balancing act, wasn't it, last week? Nothing exciting, that's for sure. All right, let's talk about gold. And I've got gold in, oh my God, let's get rid of these things. I'm not sure what that looks like, but it doesn't look like something I'm interested in. Let's get rid of them. Dark green gone, red gone, and okay. Righto. So as I was about to say, I've got gold in a jam at the moment and really not sure which direction this takes next. Weekly chart's telling me that we are still above this trend line and we are struggling to get above the monthly pivot. Got above it briefly at the beginning of the month, but it's closed underneath it, closed underneath it, closed underneath it in the last 3 weeks. But above the trade line or trend line, if you like. To me, it appears as though we are in a pivot sandwich where the pivots are all over price, or prices all over the pivots, whichever way you want to look at it. We've got a pennant formation. Maybe it's there. And price is just locked in here. Really don't know what happens next with gold. However, my bias remains short on the back of these this triple high, and so far lower highs and lows until this one. That could be a higher low, which makes it again on that really interesting side, but untradeable side for me at the moment. It was interesting with the indices last week, and I'm sure Ash will have a chat about this as well. Indices were in deep SH1T last week, whereas we had, in other words, indicating a risk-off scenario, yet the currencies were exactly the opposite, giving us a risk-on appetite with Aussie, CAD, New Zealand. Not so much the Aussie, but certainly the Kiwi and the CAD were on fire last week, and the Aussie lagging that trio. Of course, that trio representing the commodity currencies and risk-on currencies. And it was certainly risk-on as far as the currencies were concerned last week, whereas the indices, to my mind anyway, were certainly risk-off, with all of them having a little bit of a tumble, or so it seemed to me. This week, look, I've got nothing left in the market at the moment. We can go back to CAD Swiss if you weren't in on Thursday. I decided to close this out here, and it's still going, but it has reached the ultimate target that I had set myself, but I did decide to get out early. I don't have any qualms about that, unless, of course, it goes to here somewhere without giving me another opportunity to get into it, which is my want, frankly. I do want to get back in this because I don't think it's over. But look at that. It's just like one of Elon Musk's Starlink launches. Incredible. Hello, mate.
Hi, buddy. How you doing?
I'm going okay. How about you?
Yeah, well, mate. Yeah, I don't think your decision was a bad one. I'm completely with you. I think
yeah, I'm not worried about it.
It's difficult, isn't it? When sort of trades get close to those positions, and you had it for a long time. So the last sort of like little bit was a drip really against it, and I actually didn't even have the stomach to stay in as long as you did. So I think you came out at the right time. The thing with it is that I agree as well that I think it probably does go through this, but that move is so extreme that you have to kind of question whether it can do it on first time of asking. And if it does, it's probably going to crash near to this level anyway. So if it goes through, it's probably coming back here in and around this particular point. So this isn't the right price to be buying this. And usually if it's not the right price to be buying, it's usually around about the right price to be getting out. I just don't know what happens to turn this around. Oil is still kind of, predicted to reduce demand. So there's no reason to kind of suggest that the oil story could drive this lower. We've now started to see a pause right across the board. And this is the this is the paradox, I suppose, with all this stuff, is that the CAD has been above the Swiss National Bank in its chase for interest rates for quite some time, and yet the CAD was coming down. I suppose you could argue now that there's a little bit more certainty, because the Swiss National Bank also paused last week. Now there's more certainty about where interest rates are likely to settle. The CAD then does become a value, because then the swap rates and the carry positions then become genuine values. You know, you swap out in Swiss franc and go and buy some
Also,
Canadian dollars.
The CPI rose in Canada last week. So the central bank is probably going to be questioning whether they should be still pausing at their next meeting. One more thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And the other thing with the CAD, and I forgot it last week. I had three reasons I didn't think it was a good one to hold, and I forgot the third one. I thought I had it, but actually I had remembered it. And the reason is because the seasonal pattern on the CAD is not very good.
Yeah.
You know, kind of coming into this time of year. In saying that, the Swissie's not much better, but you know, right now. But we are sort of about to hit that kind of that reversal area with the CAD. And I'll tell you that the Euro CAD is a really solid position as we kind of go into the later end of the year. Really starting in November, so it's got a few weeks left.
Interesting, because I was thinking of that as a potential sell this week. But
EuroCAD.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's okay because actually I think that the lower this goes, the lower the EuroCAD goes, up until around about the November time period, it suggests that seasonal pattern has probably got more chance of working out. Because as we know, things don't go on forever, and the more extreme the move, the more likely it is to not just reverse, but reverse quite hard. So I think EuroCAD maybe does have a little bit more downside. I can't really see trends changing so today. You know, there's nothing in the way of data. I mean, there is data, of course, but there's nothing significant in the way of data. So there's no reason for things to turn around. I quite like you were talking about the indexes. The Nasdaq particularly got had a terrible run. I quite like the FTSE. I've got to say, you know, the FTSE is kind of is in a bit of a weak position right now, but I quite like it for some upside. And one of the reasons is because, well, in fact, two reasons really. One because of the oil scenario, but the other thing is we've had a story this week over the weekend that the Chancellor is looking to encourage people to buy UK businesses through a tax-free ISA. So they've got this kind of stocks and shares ISA, but there's some other implementation that they're going to be bringing in, which encourages people to then go out and buy UK stocks. I think that is going to be amazing for the FTSE. You know, as soon as because the big problem that the UK has got right now is that companies are finding that the US is a much more attractive place to do business. Well, if they can somehow encourage more money flowing into those UK companies, then it might just redress the balance a little bit. And the FTSE is actually held up pretty well. If you compare the Nasdaq and the S&P and the Dow and the DAX and the CAC are on, the FTSE is actually held up pretty well. And I think it's due a run. And I also think that that the government will, you know, because they're looking to implement something to encourage investment, I think it's going to work out. I don't love the price. Big problem really with the price. You know, you're looking at a weekly chart. We are on a weekly area of support, and it could well hold here. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do hold here for the day. But 2 weeks ago's green bar is not the best bar to kind of just see it take off from. I'd like to see a genuine move back down again, maybe along your triangular down line. You know, that would be better. I wouldn't mind that at all. You know, coming back to that WS2, is it the area? Sorry, no, WR2, WS2.
WS2,
yeah, WS2. That WS2 area, that would look like an attractive price, and I'd be looking for some longs in the FTSE, but things need some settling down. And I agree with your assessment on gold as well. You know, I quite like gold for some upside, but you kind of have to question what's going to give it the momentum to carry it through, because now we've seen the Fed have a hawkish pause, which I don't really ever buy into. They've got this hawkish pause. And numbers, as you just said about Canada, numbers from the States are quite similar, where they haven't beaten inflation, and they've got this hawkish pause going on. So the numbers would have to start to ease back. Probably not that fast, but they'd have to kind of continue to ease back. And if they do, I think that pause is probably here to stay. Of course, if they don't, the hawkish rhetoric will then come into light, and then we don't have any real reason to buy gold. But a pause from the central bank actually is quite bullish for gold, but the rhetoric is bearish for gold, and it just depends on whether we believe the rhetoric. And I don't see why you would believe the rhetoric, in as much that all they've said is, if the data suggests that we're going, that we should raise, we will raise. Well, we kind of, is that a no-brainer? I mean, of course they will. I don't know why. I don't know why that sort of thing is newsworthy, and I don't know why that sort of thing would spook investors. It's either that the data is weak and they won't be going up, or the data becomes out too strong and they'll continue to go up because they have to. So I'm not really buying it. A huge surprise from the Bank of England last week to pause their interest rates when inflation's at 6.7%. It's just that's to me seems like a bit of a wild pause, and I can't see that one sticking. So the pound has tanked.
Certainly by GBP, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, the pound tanked and struggled. But you have to question whether that will hold. I can't see how the Bank of England really end up being allowed to carry through with it was another hawkish hawkish pause supposedly, but the fact that they paused is incredibly dovish really for the UK. So not really too much to do. I don't think today. I think there's going to be minor opportunities. Tomorrow's and interested to get your views on the yen, because tomorrow's BOJ core CPI inflation data comes out tomorrow. The yen is incredibly oversold, and one of those currencies that if you're going to look at anything, you're probably going to be looking at that. Monetary policy meeting minutes also from Japan on Wednesday, depending on what's said there. Can they get more dovish? I can't see how really, but I suppose there's always a chance that could drive the market. Looking down
history will tell you that $1.50 is probably as far as it wants to go anyway. Yes. Are we talking BOJ steps in here, or are we not? I don't know.
Yeah, some yield curve control could come into play. I mean, that they can't have their currency go stupidly low and it not harm the economy. So that they may have to do something, and it might just be purely that, as we've said before, not so much that the yen catch up, that the BOJ catch up with the other central banks, but the other central banks fall back into line, and that starts to boost the yen. So if it's not a yen story that drives the yen higher, i.e. we don't get anything from the monetary policy minutes, we don't get anything from CPI, where the yen might start to drive higher is, for example, on Thursday, when we get further initial jobless claims from the US, we get GDP quarter on quarter, and we get core PC prices. If those numbers come out to be weak, then of course you'd suggest that the dollar yen would be a selling opportunity. And also we got GDP from the UK on Friday. But the problem with the UK with the pound yen is that it's already had a bit of a move. So it's
let me pose you a question while we're on GDP.
Yeah.
I've got a trade on, or I've got an order on dollar CAD.
Yeah.
Long. Now, I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks that the dollar is overbought, right?
Yeah.
And it has finally reached that level that I said I would be starting to look for sells. However, I look at, and this was the last thing I looked at, mind you, just to see if I could get a heads up on what might happen fundamentally. I note that both the dollar and the CAD have got GDP figures out this week.
Mm-hmm.
I think the CAD is month to month and the dollar is quarter on quarter. Not sure that if that's the right way around. So it's a little bit misleading in that regard, but the Canadians are tipping that GDP will fall, and the US are tipping that GDP will rise. And there's a huge disparity there. GDP is negative in Canada and 2 point something in the US.
Yeah.
And yes, I concede that one is month on month and the other is quarter on quarter. And I'd probably have to go back and have a look at those other 2 months that are in question. But to me, that sounds very much like fundamentally dollar CAD should be bullish.
Yeah.
What I've now got is this situation, and if I go to the bigger time frame, I've got a box range in here which probably could be a little bit tighter, and it changes the story quite dramatically to me. But I'll point out the bigger picture first. So if I call that the box range, 2 highs, 2 lows, then we've come off the bottom, we're headed towards the top. However, if I tighten that up, then we've come off the top and potentially headed towards the bottom. This is where my quandary lay. Yeah, I'd hesitate to call that a bull flag, but it's certainly a channel. And if I look at the channel on the monthly basis, again, we're at the top of it, probably headed towards the bottom. But I look at this trend line and this horizontal level, and I see the failure for price to get through there, and therefore in a bounce area, probably back to the top of the channel. So I'm really in 2 minds as to which way this goes. So I've gone with, it is a game changer bar, and the game changer bar, to my mind, is also a little bit iffy, because where's the big boss here? Is the big boss the double bottom? Is the big boss the double top? Is the big boss the double bottom? Good question. So I haven't really got a heads up in any way, shape or form. Therefore, is my fundamental analysis, if you like, on that very, very small point of GDP, is it sound? And what do you think? Is this going somewhere this week, or is it just staying in this range?
I think my thought was, when I looked at the fundamentals and all the other data at the start of the week, it looked to me like short-term positions were going to be the ones that did the best. I can't see, sort of like after the moves that we've had, and kind of coming into the close of the month as well, I couldn't see a picture that suggested another wild week like we've had.
Yep.
And when you consider as well now, that's not just because of the price action. That's also because of the fundamental data. I mean, you're talking about GDP month over month, which is significant, but it's not as significant as CPI. It's not as significant as central bank announcements. The only inflation data that, well, not the only, but there's a few inflation data points this week from the UK, from Europe, and from Japan. GDP is so backward looking in some regard, you know, because it's sort of it's kind of like the final part of the cake. After you've seen sort of manufacturing data, after you've seen services data and all that stuff, then you start to kind of bring in what did that lead to, and that's the GDP number. So because there's not a lot in the way of fundamental drivers, it would suggest to me that and because we had the wild week that we had, that would suggest to me that we don't really have opportunities on longer term timeframes equal to the ones on short term timeframes, and therefore that game changer bar on the weekly, I think is as valid as anything else. I don't think it's necessarily sort of something that we could drive by what happens to the data. But if you think about where we ended up last week, it was basically dollar bullish across the board, and even against the CAD. So I don't see why there would all of a sudden be a turnaround in that particular position, considering what we've got. I mean, okay, Thursday, yes, we do have those initial jobless claims and PCE and all that kind of thing, and that could drive it lower if it's an extreme diminishing of that data. But you would suspect it's probably going to be kind of business as usual, but probably to range areas rather than breakout points. I think if I was looking at this, I'd look at it on the weekly, and then I'd probably come down a few time frames just to see if there's maybe a short-term trend to take advantage of, to probably still aim for where you're going for, but maybe looking to add that, you know, maybe push stops up against short-term swings rather than the long-term swings.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that agrees with me here, to be fair. Maybe we've got this going on.
That's the one I'm looking at, mate. I'm looking at that particular. I see. Yeah, you got that, but there's also, if you bring that, rather than drawing one of those, I wonder whether if you look at the the symmetrical triangle pattern that's on there instead. So so rather than sort of drawing an equidistant line, it's actually two trend lines, one coming from the top, one coming from the bottom. I wonder if that's really what we've got. You know, the bottom, yeah, from there, yeah. I think the bottom trend line looks right, but I wonder whether we're really looking at something like that. And that would suggest
We're
that
squashed in again.
it's squashed in, but it does suggest still you're in the right area. I mean, a measured move on that should take you to profit as well. So you know, I don't see why not. But that's on a 4-hour chart, and that would be a big move, wouldn't it? On a 4-hour? I don't know.
On a big move, what, to here, to the entry?
Yes, yeah. What would that mean?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Yeah, but I think that's okay. It's
Far
not
better
to
to
say it
pick
doesn't
that
go
up.
there, but I wonder whether it needs to be managed on shorter term time frames. You know, rather than just one of those that you just are likely to let go. I think these ones are the ones that kind of go a little bit and then they sort of turn back on you and just aren't able to.
Don't like that so much.
No, what's a 1 and a bit % move? And over a week, that's not a big move, but of course, on a day by day basis, that would be large. And are we going to get another one of those this week? I would, considering the type of data, I would have thought not.
Fair enough. At the end of the day, there were only two things that I even considered this morning. The other one was Kiwi CAD. Kiwi had a big week last week, so did the CAD. But interestingly, as I said in my earlier statement, 3 of the risk-on currencies, dollar, CAD, Kiwi, and Aussie. Aussie had a mixed week last week. Kiwi had a good week. CAD had a good week. And against the CAD and the Kiwi, the Aussie had a poor week.
Yeah.
What's that telling us?
Well, we had minutes, I think, from Australia as well today. I think that there is, you know, when you think of the CAD's kind of, the reason for the CAD rallying is relatively easy to find if you factor in the oil scenario. If we believe that as a driver, then I think we can make a case for the CAD quite easily.
But when we look at everything else, for the Kiwi, because the Kiwi outpaced the CAD big time last week.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So when it comes down to the Kiwi, I saw a huge rally in the Kiwi, and I was really scrabbling around for information of why we got this big boost in the New Zealand dollar. And I've got to be honest, I couldn't find it. I don't know what happened to the Kiwi because it wasn't just a bit of a move. It was a solid charge. And that's a question, you know. That's a bit of a question. I don't know. I don't really know why that happened. And I would like to find out, and maybe we'll have to speak to Paul about that, because it could be something political, possibly. But it wasn't anything on the data. And this is, you know, always the slight challenge is that you know, we're looking at data points and you know, suggesting that these data points will make the moves, but it's not just that. It is also to do with kind of some of the headlines that the governments in each country will release as well, and there might have been something.
Well, this is interesting because you know, the dollar index has been positive for the last 10 weeks.
Yeah,
the Kiwi has only had 2 negative weeks against the dollar.
That is interesting.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I don't think any other currency can say that.
No.
Certainly not the pound, certainly not the euro.
That is interesting. I mean, you know, about all I could probably come up with on that front would be possibly the interest rate differential, maybe. I mean, what we got. So the RBA, they're stuck at 4.1. RBNZ's at 5.5. So with the Fed, you know, they're the only ones that are actually, you know, on par with the Fed. It kind of the argument kind of fades a little bit when you realize the BOE's at 5.25%, so only just a little bit under. But yeah, I don't know. Difficult one to kind of find the reason for that.
Sorry, I was on the daily chart then, not the weekly. But the case is still the same.
Yeah,
it's the only currency that's performing reasonably well against the dollar. The only one.
Yeah, agreed.
That makes it interesting for things like Euro Kiwi, which I was on about last week. But I was looking to buy it last week as it came back into here. It didn't come back into here again.
Me too. I was with you. The technical, absolutely right. And actually, the Euro Kiwi now all of a sudden is quite an attractive selling opportunity, isn't it? But yeah, I was with you when that came back to that position. I was looking to buy that as well, not for any reason that it was there was a technical picture there that suggested it could go, and I didn't see anything about the about New Zealand or the Kiwi that would all of a sudden make it rally. But that's what flagged it up to me, because I was watching that particular position. I was like, what's going on here? How come? And then I looked across the board, and the Kiwi had rallied everywhere. And I was scratching my head and trying to find information as to why, but I couldn't find it. But I guess there's something going on.
Well, yes, as you say, ask 4B, but he's probably wrapped up in the World Cup rugby at the moment, so
yeah,
wouldn't be too interested in trading. No, he would be. He'd be across it. But I think he was actually of the opposing opinion. He was saying that the economy in Kiwi land wasn't real good at all.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Did, yeah, absolutely right. He did say that. And I guess all this stuff is relative, isn't it? I mean, you kind of get a view of your own economy because you're living it. But actually, unless you can, it's all about comparisons, relatively speaking, the Kiwi economy appears to be doing better than the UK, and that's kind of what we got. But yeah, I mean, trade balance, that was negative. I had a good look around, mate. Trade balance was negative from New Zealand. There was nothing released on Friday that would have kind of suggested that we should have got the boost we did. Westpac consumer sentiment was a bit of a dip down lower as well.
So it remains a mystery.
Imports up, I guess. Exports down. Maybe the trade balance because of the way it kind of was made up. But no, that wouldn't be enough.
All right.
It's called Straits, is it? Is it called no, Straits is the Singapore paper, isn't it? What's the one in New Zealand called?
I'm buggered if I know.
Oh well, I'll have a look. It's a strange name for a paper. I'll have a look.
It is, but there's a few of them around the world that's named like that from me.
Yeah, well, to be honest, that's the sort of stories they write. That's what it should be called.
It's probably the NZ Times or something, is it?
Maybe. I'm sure I've got it.
What is it? The financial publication? Is it? Is that what you're looking for?
No, just. I mean, anything that kind of anything that would report on probably government movements and what the government's doing.
Oh, okay.
I think would be of interest, but I'll have a look because I've got it. I've got some. I did have it somewhere in my favorites.
While you're doing that, I'll have a look at euro versus the dollar. Actually, we had a failure on that last week, didn't we? Let's see if it'll work this week. My goodness, what a mess. What happened Friday? In London session.
During London session, I will tell you.
In fact, in the next hour.
We had core retail sale. On
was
Friday,
in the second
we had
hour.
Retail sales, and
okay.
We also had, and there's a little bit of news from the dollar, but it's all from the UK actually. CPI services was lower, manufacturing was a bit lower. Terrible week.
At 9 o'clock. Or was it 8 o'clock?
Well, that was 9 o'clock UK was some data from Europe.
Obviously, that was bit of a candle in context. It was certainly the biggest of the week. Sorry, not the week. Yeah, probably the week. All right. Today, no, I couldn't possibly. I can't trade that. That's not possible to trade for me. Let me give you what I would need to see to trade it. That's probably the best I can do.
Looking bar.
Yuck.
I'll tell you what, mate. That, I mean, that kind of matches what we're looking at with the Kiwi. That's a strange looking bar.
This one.
That one you just said, that red one, that big red one. That's an odd looking bar. I mean, we had some services PMIs, but they weren't extreme.
That ruled me out of this one, guys. I couldn't trade that. It's got to move before I can trade it. Trading breakouts here is suicide, because you'll get this sort of thing happening all the time until it does actually break out. So I wouldn't be trading that until it does. So I'm pretty boring today, mate. I haven't got that many ideas. I think dollar CAD is the only one that was interesting, and I can make a case pretty much either way for it. In particular, when I continue to look at this chart, and I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks that here's the sell point. And now I'm trying to convince myself it's actually going to keep going. So yeah, it's a tough one.
I think being boring is okay today. I don't sort of that is a strange looking bar, and when you kind of think that particular bar matches in some respects that weirdness that happened with the Kiwi, you'd sort of think that today would be a bit of a licking of the wounds scenario. I think probably there was a lot of money lost on Friday, and probably quite a bit won as well by a small percentage of people. There was some made as well, but global equities kind of apart from the FTSE, but most of them retracing as they did. Lots of those investment firms and pensions and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of concern out there, as that money was kind of as their pots were reduced. So I wonder whether today might be a bit of a licking of the wound scenario. Maybe no major. I don't see major follow through today, and mainly because not a lot really happened. I mean, the Fed paused on interest rates, but said that they might raise them. The UK paused interest rates. That was a big one, I suppose, but said they might raise them. The S&P did the same. So we had a load of pausing, and markets not really sure which direction that they should go in, sort of, but they did sell off. And I wonder whether today we just get a little bit of a bit of a licking of the wounds, and people kind of reassessing where they want to be sort of like allocating capital, or do they want to actually just take the capital out of some of these risk assets altogether? I think it's a bit premature for that. So think maybe some movement in the opposite direction.
Last week or the week before that that the bond market is ridiculously attractive, and therefore the other asset classes are not, by definition, I suppose.
Yeah.
So does that continue to mean weakness in stock markets, or in all indices, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it does, and again, it's a strange one, because what have they all of a sudden just woken up? I think this is something that we've been saying for weeks, for a long time, and they've all of a sudden woken up and they're going to start putting their money over there. I don't really buy it. We are in this seasonal kind of short for indexes. They sell off into the end of October. We have all these stories that the indexes aren't attractive anymore. Everybody goes to the bond market, and then we hit October, and all of a sudden everybody's buying up again, and all these stories were just seen as absolute rubbish. Is that silver?
Was silver. It's now gold. I'll go back to silver.
Silver's an interesting one as well. See, silver's an interesting one because actually silver looks like it's more bullish than gold. It looks like it's holding out much better than gold. But but if there's a genuine story, I mean, not a great not a great 3-bar pattern, that last one, because it was a more of a kind of
This is one of your failed morning stars, isn't it?
Yeah, you got a false dawn kind of coming in there, and I don't love that. You know, that would suggest some downside.
And interestingly, you had a failed for another reason the week before, right? Oh, sorry.
Well, no, that played out. That played out because actually that red bar. Yeah, I mean the red bar close. You know, there is the classic pattern, but we have. Well, I say it's played out. It hasn't played out. It hasn't had any follow through. But the actual pattern completed, but then we didn't get any follow through. But the you know, if we are getting this global recession, you would suspect that silver would actually perform a lot worse than gold. But there's something about silver which actually sort of looks quite attractive in comparison, you know, and I guess if you are going to be looking at precious metals, maybe this is the one.
Well, I'm not sure how long I've been saying go and buy some, but not trade it, but buy it.
Yeah,
I still hold that position. Nothing's changed.
Yeah. Well, it looks okay, doesn't it? It looks like silver might well be possibly the story of the week. It's got a monthly pivot to get through, but it's either going to the bottom of the range or the top of the range. I don't think it's breaking out. But I wonder.
Yeah, that level there's mediocre, but it's the only one I could find closest to the market.
Yeah,
I suppose there's another one down here. It's a bit of a, yeah. I don't know if I want to be trading it right now. It's in that sandwich again, to my mind, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly I'm a fan of silver. I think silver's got huge potential.
Yes, I'm with you. And talking to, you know, some potential, I think the yen is doing all right this morning. Just checking out the Swiss yen, that's actually having a bit of a move to the downside.
Have we got a thesis for the week?
My thesis for the week is pay close attention to the yen, if I'm honest. I mean, that's sort of that's as close as I've got. I still think there's some negativity out there. I think that we're going to get kind of caught in a few false breaks to the upside and then all of a sudden reverse. I think that the fact that we've now paused on those from those central banks brings the yen back into the conversation. And I think that we should be looking at positions, the yen against others. I quite like the euro yen for short. If CPI comes out weak from Europe, I don't see why this wouldn't go short. We're already seeing the Swiss yen going short. Obviously, the pound yen I was talking about last week. So I think that there is a case to be made for some yen upside. The difficult thing with the yen, of course, always is, you know, can you afford to hold it? And it all depends on how much movement you get.
It's a tough one to trade. There's no doubt about that.
But I like it. I like the yen. I think the yen would be my takeaway for the week.
Okay, so maybe well, let's look at it in two different ways, I suppose. What I said before was is now getting to 150 plus dollar yen, not euro yen. Sorry. It's now up nearly to 150. And what happens when it gets to 150? Last time it happened was prior to the turn of the century. And, sorry, not last time. The time before that was prior to the turn of the century. And it just went down for, what, 13 years. Before it rallied again. So it doesn't like it above that level. There's no question. And
recession favors the yen. I mean, we know that.
Yeah. And if it did get above there, as you said before, can the BOJ afford their economy to be completely wrecked by that? And will they step in? So I think you're very, very near a point where, not just because it's oversold, it's to a point where it really, gravity has to take over, one would have thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, we've been saying it's oversold for a long time now.
Aussie yen looks attractive to me.
Well, if you go back to what we were talking about before, given the Aussie was the only Comdol last week that struggled, both the Kiwi and the CAD had stellar weeks, but the Aussie did not. So,
yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at that. Aussie, yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So, even against the yen, the Aussie struggled last week. Okay, it rallied a little, but it came off its high very quickly. So, if you compare that to CAD yen and Kiwi yen, there's no comparison, really, at the end of the day. So I think you're onto something there. If we favour the yen with a caution notice, then potentially this may well be the one. Double top, lower high. Why not?
Tell you what, mate. One more test of that double topish area would be really attractive.
Yeah, just about there, eh?
About there, right? I mean, there's a trend line, isn't there, from those two peaks now? Yeah.
Can't see what's over here. Yeah, okay. I'd be on board with that. Can I start looking? Why not? It's going to take a few days on the daily chart, that's for sure.
Well, that's okay. That would match up with some of that CPI release. But
you need to see it back here. Not happy at this level?
I don't. Let me see if I love this price. No, I don't. Do you know what? I don't like this price, and I'll tell you why I don't like this price is because of the 4 hour. The 4 hour to me looks like there may well be just enough juice to give us a little move higher.
Yeah, in particular off these pivots too. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So no, I wouldn't get in here. And these are the ones that I'm happy to miss if there's a collapse, because it just becomes a very bad habit to kind of get into these things when there's that lack of value. So no, it doesn't do it for me. And I guess the only sort of place that I would consider is that there's a trend line on the 4 hour going from the high bit. Which still brings us up there. Yeah, I'd want it there. And then there's also no, actually I'd go with the high point. There's also a trend line from the lows, if you sort of like have the that one. Yeah. Not there. I'd tuck it in, tuck it up to the next low in. Yeah, keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah, there, that one. Yeah. I mean, it would have to get up. No, where you were. Go back to the point is fine. Yeah, there, that little tail. It's not the best cross, but it is a cross, and it would have to get up there in the next probably 4, but within the next 3 bars, I would have thought. But that's if it did that, I'd be okay with that, mate. I wouldn't. That would not keep me probably from trading it. I'd probably quite happy to trade that. But not here. That's still what we're talking about, 40 pips.
From where you want it to be.
Yeah, that's where we are now. Yeah, we're 40 pips from any price that I would start considering on this one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, as I said, the only thing I'm really interested in is to see how this dollar CAD pans out for the week at this point in time anyway. and really little else until something unfolds. Everything else to mine, or for my value circumstances, I suppose. Aussie I can't trust now, but it's probably a sell, as you say.
Yeah.
CAD is at resistance, but seems still to be very strong. And that really does make me, well, I'll tell you what it does for me. It gives me a lot of confidence to get back into CAD Swiss if I can get a pullback.
Yeah.
But buying it now is just impossible.
Agreed. It's just difficult to know what's, difficult to see anything that can actually bring this back again.
Yeah, 100%.
Actually, the Swissies all of a sudden become the weakest currency of the pile.
Yeah, and it had a beautiful run there, but now it's completely out of favour.
Yeah, which makes sense in a lot of ways, because of that beautiful run and because of that overextended move. They all change hands eventually.
What goes up comes down.
Yeah.
Pound Kiwi rally, interesting. That might be something I'd want to look at. Pull back to here. Weekly pivot. What's that look like on a daily? Not too bad. I might be looking at pound Kiwi if it gets back to here. Wow. Certainly sold off, no question. I've run out of ideas, mate. That's pretty much me done, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you, mate.
Hello, Paul P. Sorry, mate. I saw that message yonks ago and I didn't answer you. My apologies for that. If you guys in the room have got any ideas, more than happy to entertain them, I would have to say.
Yeah.
But to me, it looks like a pretty quiet start to the week.
Yeah, and it's really sort of. I think there are retracements in. Whoever sort of suggested the pound key, whether that's yours or somebody else's, I think there are retracements in. I think the danger is that all they are is shallow. I don't think we get kind of like full blown. You look at how far this has come down. I don't think, for an example, this is going back to that weekly pivot. Your target line looks about right to me. It's sort of a shallow retracements back, mess around in this area for a few days, maybe a few weeks. Then we start to kind of establish something new. But I think that the moves in the one direction have been so strong. I think things need to settle down. I don't think they're going through. That's the one thing I would say. I think sort of like possibly Swiss yen could collapse a bit. But aside from that, I don't see the FTSE kind of like collapsing. I don't even see the DAX or the NASDAQ collapsing either. I think bounces from here are likely, but I think those bounces are probably short-lived. I don't think they're going to bounce and reverse direction. I think we are now in the downward move phase. But I don't think we just take another leg from here. Is my point, which is why I think short-term positions are probably the right way to go. And actually, I think short-term positions, counter-trend trading.
Counter-trend, I was going to say.
Yeah,
sounds like,
because that's where we are today.
Something to entertain. Yep.
Yeah, that's where we are today. We're at the low end of the range. So you sort of, having a little bounce from this point, I think is fine. But I wouldn't hold on to anything. It's just like a little bounce and then get out for me.
Like the thesis, because I haven't got one myself, frankly.
Yeah.
So I'll agree with yours. Sounds good to me.
What he said.
If you're Australian, next week, sadly, this show will be 1 hour later. Oh, here we go. It'll be at, what's it normally? When I say normally, in non-daylight saving time, it's at 5 minutes to 5 in the afternoon. So next week, if you're Australian, it will be 5 minutes to 6 in the afternoon as we wind our clocks forward and daylight saving starts. If you're in New Zealand, that's already happened yesterday. And then, of course, in a couple of weeks' time, it'll go another hour because you guys will come off daylight saving, right?
Yes, I think we do, mate. I think we do.
Yep, that time of year where I have
I
to
can
stay
never
up
keep
till
up with it.
midnight.
I've got to be honest.
It confuses me as well, especially if I have to nominate a time. But nobody else will be affected unless you live in Australia, of course, for next
Yeah.
week, for next Monday. So I'm happy to take an early mark, mate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool. And also, we should probably let everybody know that this Thursday is our last Thursday as well, right?
Yeah, well, that's a fact. And where are we? October. Yes. 2nd of October, I think that is. Oh, that's next Monday, isn't it? So it'll be, there'll be no 6th of October. So yes, next Thursday won't happen in terms of trading buddies, guys. So concentrate all your efforts on Monday as we try and shape the week ahead. And we'll go from there. Nobody's got any comments, so nobody's got any ideas what's happening this week, except for Ash.
Yeah.
Trade counter trend on short-term time frames.
Yeah, that's me,
okay.
mate. Yeah, short on the stuff long on the yen, but yeah, counter trend trading. And apart from against the yen, maybe I should make that quite clear. I would not counter trend trade the yen right now.
Okay, there we go. Righto, guys, thank you for being our trading buddies for the day. We'll look forward to seeing you, catching up on things somewhere in. Okay, cool. We will see you all on Thursday, hopefully, and for the very last time on the Thursday. And, of course, we'll have next Monday. George is back next Monday. He's having a public holiday today. Have a good week ahead, everyone, and we'll see you Thursday. Bye-bye for now.